Hello everybody, this is Alicia and I am going to work out the 10 problems that I gave you for the chapter 3 and 4 review. So we have our first problem here. We are trying to find the exact solutions to x squared minus 5x plus 3 equals 0. And so we begin by looking at our sum and our product. So our sum here is going to be negative 5. And our product is going to be 3. So the first thing that we're doing is we are trying to determine if we can find two numbers multiplied together equal 3 and added together equal negative 5. And we cannot do that. There are no two numbers that we multiply together to get 3 and add together to get negative 5. So we are going to have to find the exact solutions to this a different way. So there's two different ways that we can do that. The first way that we could do it is we could use the quadratic formula. So that is one way that we could do it, the quadratic formula. And that is actually the way that I am going to do it, is using the quadratic formula. However, I do want you to realize you could also do this by completing the square. Completing the square is an alternative way to solve this problem. So either way works, whichever way you prefer. Now, completing the square would work for this one because our A is 1. However, our B is negative 5, and to do completing the square, you have to divide B in half and then square it. So sometimes that gets a little ugly. So really the quadratic formula is the best way to solve this problem. So I'm going to write out the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC, and all of that is divided by 2 over A. Now our quadratic, x squared minus 5x plus 3 equals 0, is already in standard form. So I am going to identify my A, my B, and my C here. My A is 1. That's the coefficient that goes with the x squared. My B is negative 5. That is the coefficient that is with the x. And my 3 is my constant. That is just the standalone number that's not with anything raised to a power. So now I'm going to plug in my values. So we have negative 5, so we know that that's going to become positive. Then we have plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times our C, which is 3. And all of that is going to be divided by 2 times A, which is 1. Now we begin simplifying, and we end up with negative 5, so that becomes positive. Then negative 5 squared is positive 25. And then we have negative 4 times 1 times 3. So that is going to be subtract 12. All of that is over 2. So we are going to subtract our 12 from 25 because that is inside our square root symbol, and we end up with 5 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. Now, you can stop right here. A couple of reasons that we know it's time to stop is because this 13 cannot be simplified any further. There is not a perfect square factor of 13, and it is not a perfect square. So we are going to leave that 13 inside the square root symbol, and that it's going to stay there for our final answer. The other thing that we look at is we look and see, is there anything other than a 1 in front of our radical? And there is not, so there is nothing that we can simplify. So there's not a factor in 5, 2, or the 1 that's in front of the square root that can be simplified out. So our final answer here is going to be 5 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. And you could potentially write it as 5 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. The other thing that you could do is you could separate it out. You could say 5 plus square root of 13 over 2 and 5 minus the square root of 13 over 2. Any of those right there are acceptable, and that right there, I'm going to circle these right here because this is our final answer. I know my math lab likes to have it in 2 separate answers, so we will leave it just like that. And that is problem number 1 on the 10 most missed problems.